Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is home ownership consultant Ross Kay from the WealthyHomeowner.ca, Canada's authority on home ownership. Welcome back to the show, Ross.
And thanks for having me back, Jim.
Ross, we had a listener reach out and ask about the Stats Canada RPPI, or Residential Property Price Index, and asked if it could be trusted over the MLS benchmark and TerraNet house price indices you criticize here on the show. Well, is Statistics Canada reliable?
Statistics Canada has got a hodgepodge metric that is part its own, part stolen from other people. Statistics Canada participated in the OECD's RPPI report. It's a massive work, Jim. Huge book. I think it took me probably maybe 3 days now to glance through it to make sure that I wasn't missing anything. What it was is it took all of the countries, sent their statisticians and economists together to this OEC meeting, and they participated. They're trying to come up with a way to measure house price change, because all of the metrics, everybody's got a different idea of a metric, and they can't come to a conclusion. So they came to the conclusion. They didn't come to a conclusion in this report. The irony of this report was, considering how massive it is, was at the end they couldn't come up to one answer. Well, of course they can't. When you're measuring home buyers and you're not measuring house prices, you're not measuring houses, you're always going to have a problem trying to create an index. And your Statistics Canada index is such. It's made up of three parts. It's got a new home price index, which they've improved. Now, I would tell your listeners that the new home price index is probably pretty reliable. Certainly since the time that they started to calculate the data more accurately, which was in around 2017, and they're trying to improve. We should also remember that taxpayers are funding this initiative. The StatsCan was given hundreds of millions of dollars to work on their housing portal. They've come up with this RPPI, which is a joke. Imagine you're spending hundreds of millions of dollars trying to solve a problem, and you come up with another flawed methodology. The RPPI includes new home price index. It includes resale RRPPI, resale residential property price index, and it has another component. So they put the three of these together and they come up with their number. Well, of course, for the resale homes, they use the TerraNet National Bank House Price Index. And anybody who studies that index knows that it simply repeats the Canadian real estate average purchase price, or the Canadian average real estate average selling price, or the MLS average selling price. So TerraNet National Bank Index and the CREA average price always equals one another. There may be a couple of months in delay in TerraNet reporting it. Statistics Canada clearly doesn't understand that when TerraNet updates its index in July for June, it will actually be reporting change recorded as far back as October of last year, because TerraNet reports closed prices, not on the day that the deal closes, not on the deal that the sale took place. So let's say that TerraNet's own index goes up 8% between November of last year and May of this year. Again, a fraudulent number, but let's just say it goes up. And then reporting change in June on a house price sale that took place in November before that run-up took place. That's why you have this delay while it takes so long for the TerraNet to catch up. So Statistics Canada, for hundreds of millions of dollars, has created this index. Let me conclude this one this way. When not too long ago, every Canadian who was looking for a home went to MLS.ca. They didn't go to Realtor.ca. They went to MLS.ca. It was the number one website in Canada for unique visits in a month that were not social media based or a search engine based. So as a regular website, MLS.ca was the most visited website in Canada. But the Canadian Real Estate Association realized that the MLS trademark, being an acronym, was no longer valid because MLS Sports of the Major League Soccer. And they had found in the States that Major League Soccer could legitimately call itself MLS, rendering MLS worthless. So in Canada, they switched to Realtor.ca, and then a year later in the States, they switched to Realtor.com. So you didn't have an MLS.com, you had an MLS.ca, now it's a Realtor.com, and it's a Realtor.ca. They've dropped the MLS acronym because of copyright laws. But then you have to question, why did they come out with an MLS benchmark price when they already had Realtor.ca as their website? Why didn't they use the Realtor brand, in other words, a Realtor benchmark price, instead of MLS benchmark price, which they had already come to the conclusion that they couldn't secure with copyright? Well, that answer is pretty simple, too. What they did is they've already given you an answer why they had to switch from MLS.ca to Realtor.ca. Why did they have to rebrand MLS.ca Realtor.ca, which is what they did? Why does everybody now go to Realtor.ca, and even only older folks who were searching for houses 5 years ago still may type in MLS.ca in their browser window? Why did that take place? Well, and why have they gone ahead and labeled it MLS benchmark price instead of Realtor benchmark price? Well, what they did there was they've set themselves up to be able to rebrand the MLS benchmark price as the Realtor benchmark price when a good-sized housing correction takes place and the realtors start earning less money. And the public begins to need someone to blame. And they're going to look back and they're going to search for the MLS benchmark price. Oh, you told us house prices went up 20% year over year. So what they did is they've set that up. They can drop the MLS benchmark price, rebrand it, the Realtor benchmark price, change the methodology, and at the same time they've got an excuse. Oh, the reason we had to do this was MLS is an acronym and we couldn't protect the trademark. So we switched it to Realtor.ca. You know, we've already done this in the past when we changed MLS.ca to Realtor.ca. You see, folks, when you measure house prices by measuring home buyers, you are always going to be creating a falsehood to the people who rely upon your index. Whether it's Statistics Canada, whether it's Terranet National Bank, whether it's Cree and their MLS benchmark. These metrics all equal one another. They all equal each other if you just give it a little bit of time variance, and a time variance that changes depending on the part of the cycle that you're in and depending on the month that you're looking for it to be reported in. But over a long period of time, they are identical. Same amount of house price change. One is a con, the other is a con. What they're measuring is the average expenditure of a home buyer in a month. They are not measuring the average house price, the average selling price. They are measuring buyers. They are not measuring house prices. That's why the Statistics Canada, RPPI, is worth nothing more than any of the other crazy house price indexes that these stakeholders have convinced the public, the government, all policymakers to believe.
We'll have more with Ross Kay right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlin, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Ross K. Ross, Sue in Victoria asks, I was talking to a friend in Vancouver who is a nurse like I am. We earn the same income as we started our careers at the same time. She told me what she paid in property taxes, and I was shocked. What does Ross think about taxes and house prices? I think, don't we get a break in the greater Vancouver area?
The city of Vancouver gets a huge break, Jim. A huge break. Look at the way that we look at things, even in terms of the affordability question, Jim, is totally different than everybody else looks at it. We're all of a sudden now hearing realtors and bloggers come forward now 2 years later and all of a sudden start to talk about, oh, the investor really is not as stupid as we said he was for the last 2 years because he's actually paying down the principal of his mortgage. So the cap rate that were used 2 years ago, all of a sudden now, this month, they're starting to say those cap rates aren't valid. Well, guys, if you had a basic understanding of how investment real estate worked, how housing markets work, how the cost of housing worked, you would have been using these discussions for the last 7 years. Don't come in at the end of a housing cycle and try to extract yourself from misleading things to the public and now commenting about, oh, cap rates don't matter all of a sudden. It's the same way with this discussion on taxation. Look, voters in the city of Vancouver have voted to spend less, have a lower municipal tax rate on their income than voters in Victoria. Voters in Toronto have elected mayors, one after another, who have promised, have enshrined that their municipal household income tax will be lower than in my town here of Burlington, a short 20-minute drive away from Toronto. Yeah, you're right, Sue. You're right. A family who earns $80,000 and rents a home or buys a home in Vancouver will pay, what are we at? We're at, hold on a second, I want to be 100% sure, 66%? Let me just check this, Jim, to be sure. So I'm at 5. So if you choose to move to set down roots in Victoria, you are going to pay 66% higher. Okay, so your income, the same income in both cities, you are going to pay 66% higher tax on that income for your shelter costs in Victoria than you would in Vancouver. In other words, on $1 million home in Vancouver, you're going to spend $3,000 a year in property tax. And in $1 million home in Victoria, you're going to spend $5,000 a year in property tax. In order to qualify to buy a $1 million home, whether it's in Victoria, Vancouver, Halifax, Toronto, or Calgary, you need the exact same income. So your municipal taxes that you have to pay is an effective tax on your income. As a matter of fact, you can afford CMHC will not allow you to buy as an expensive house in Victoria than they would allow you to buy in Vancouver because of this $2,000 differential in property taxes. So, is there a correlation between a low property tax per thousand city versus a higher property tax per thousand city? Yes. The city that has the lower property tax per $1,000 of value can have a greater compound annual growth rate in their house prices over 7 to 10-year windows. Now, there is endless amount of data that verifies this, but you don't hear any municipalities talking about it. Why? Why would the mayor in Burlington, Ontario, not admit that a family who earns $80,000 living in Burlington has to pay the city of Burlington an extra $2,000 in property tax than they would have to pay the city earning the exact same amount of money in the city of Toronto. Oh, but market value assessment. No. The reason why we fought against market value assessment, there was around 100, I'm guessing with this number, so don't take me at my word at it. When municipal property tax assessment was being redone, there was a group of high-performing realtors across Canada who fought against it because we knew over the long term it would create inequality between cities, and selfishly, it would limit house price growth in our cities. So our cities, Burlington, would not see the same amount of house price growth as you would in the city of Toronto. So I would earn less commission doing the exact same job than my fellow realtor would earn in Toronto, simply because of this new property assessment valuation model. So we fought it. But of course, when you've got 99% of the realtors fighting against you, head office, CREA, is not going to start working in the interests of those noisy 100 who realize what the actual consequence of these decisions are. So CREA, in fact, backed the new property tax model. They backed it fully and endorsed it. You have leaders at your banks who all endorsed it all over the place. Well, who was right? We're sitting here in 2021, and I just told you that if you buy $1 million home in Victoria, you are going to pay $2,000 a year of your income to the municipal government in taxes versus had you purchased a home in Vancouver. Now, because these are higher priced homes, the odds are very high that this may be in the 50% tax bracket for the sake of the argument. You're going to have to earn $4,000 extra, so the share of your before tax income is even greater. Now, maybe you can get away with this if you're qualified to buy $1 million house, but think of the poor families who are in properties that are carrying for $1,500 a month or $2,000 a month. They're in a low cost rental unit, but in Vancouver they get a tax benefit versus the family who's renting the exact same, paying the exact same per month in rental fees in Victoria. Because you have to understand, folks, there is not a landlord in Canada who does not have his tenants pay all his property taxes or her property taxes. If you see any of these rent and buy scenarios where they say, oh, but the tenant doesn't have to pay property taxes. Hogwash. The tenant pays the property taxes in their rent every single month, the same way that the landlord pays the property taxes every single month. So that's the answer to that question. Yes, it's true. If you choose to buy a house if you choose to live, no matter what it is, no matter what your income is, in Victoria versus Vancouver, and you're earning the exact same amount of money, purchasing a home worth exactly the same price, you're going to pay 66% more of your income after tax to the city of Victoria than you would have had to pay to the city of Vancouver.
Today in Toronto, a homeless encampment was broken up by a large police force and security team. We've watched the same thing happen here in Vancouver, not only in city parks, but where people had been parking their recreational vehicles and campers because they can't afford a house here. Is there a solution to be found for this problem? Should we have designated areas where people can, say, park their vans and campers?
So that's a multifaceted question, Jim. So let me express first an opinion and then a data-driven answer. My opinion is this. Hey, you want to live the van life? You want to pack up your belongings and travel around Canada? Don't want to be tied down to a house? Go for it. Beautiful thing about touring around Canada as a Canadian is your health care is paid for. As long as you've got a health card, you're covered. Now, you got to watch if there's any provincial variance. You got to be in the province for so long or whatever. But, it really, for the sake of the argument, it really doesn't matter. So if that is a choice of yours, I have no problem with it. If you are directed into that decision by policies enacted by your governments, then, I've got a big problem. because I believe in the freedom of choice. I believe as a Canadian, one of the greatest benefits of this country is freedom. The freedom that my taxpayer-funded healthcare system provides. We see many comments about trying to compare house price in the United States of America with Canada, and we just laugh at them. There are websites all over the United States where any goofball can go in and type in how much the health insurance for a family of 4 or a family of 2 or whatever you want to look at in each American city would be. And it's staggering in some places. You can have in Canada about an extra $200,000 of house price because you don't have to pay health insurance premiums because they're taxpayer funded. They're included in your taxes. I mean, we can get into the discussion about municipal taxes, federal tax. That's, more complicated. But when you want to talk about an affordability calculation, folks, all of these things have to be taken into consideration or you're lying to the public. Okay? You're actually lying to the public about the most important thing that any person is ever concerned about. That's putting a roof over their head. Now, what's going on in Toronto and what has gone on in Vancouver, where they're sending police forces all dressed up in black, with clubs, with riot gear, with their masks now because of COVID, so you can't even see what the police officer looks like. You think they would put clear masks on them, by the way, folks, or shields they would have manufactured headgear with shields and built-in filters already, so you could at least see these people who they are. They are Canadian police officers. We're not in some crazy country like China or Russia where they're going to take you to a back room and kill you. We're looking at these situations, and I'm seeing homeless people in tents in a outside park being brutally moved off these places in some sorts. Now, you have to remember, these people, generally speaking, don't choose to live in a park, in a tent, in Canada. They've been directed there by the politicians. And this is how I will conclude this conversation. When you're only looking to put Band-Aids on a cut after the cut has already happened, because you were too foolish to put a sheath on the knife, for the sake of the argument, before you put that knife in somebody's hand, you were to blame. Don't try to put a Band-Aid on a solution. When we see these police forces rushing into these encampments, as they're called, and I call them camps, not encampments. Let's just call them camps. Guys are camping out. People are camping out. People, generally speaking, who a good percentage of them probably have mental health issues. What you're seeing in real time is the failing of those people, the government leaders, who have been in power for years and years and years. These people have had years to resolve these problems, instead of letting them reach ahead where you're looking to put Band-Aids on. And we all know that once an injury happens, it costs way more to fix it than had you worked on it ahead of the time and prevented the injury from ever happening. Look, all in Canada, let me leave it to your listeners this way. In Canada, Canadians do not have property rights. In other words, if I buy a home, the government can, at their whim, come to me and take my home away from me and hand me whatever cash they tell me my home is worth today. We fought for property rights beginning in 1995. Another thing, the Canadian Real Estate Association simply turned its back on because they want commission so much, and they have to work in their interests of their members so much, they don't want property rights. They don't want property rights to be enshrined in the Constitution because that decreases the trading rate. Naturally. It naturally decreases it. So if the trading rate's lower, real estate agents make less commission because not as many houses are selling. When I'm looking at this homeless encampment, I'm saying, wait a second. These guys, girls, who have been in power, have the power to fix this tomorrow because Canadian homeowners don't have property rights. Canadian commercial building owners do not have property rights. That means that any municipality anywhere in Canada can expropriate the land, expropriate your home. And all they have to do is give you whatever the home is worth today. These politicians simply need to expropriate land. Take it. You have the power to do it. When a hydro line needs to be widened, you have no problem stepping in and expropriating that land to allow the hydro lines to be widened. When a building development needs to go on, you have no problem expropriating that land so Amazon can put up a new multifaceted delivery network warehousing system. So you think so little of Canadians, so little of those most in need, that you won't use a tool that you have at your disposal to resolve this situation overnight. Look, those who are expropriated, have their property expropriated, are not going to like it. But you have the power to do this as an elected official. You can expropriate land, let's say from a commercial owner. You can tear it down and have it rebuilt in a year. Your problem is solved in a year. In the meantime, you move temporary shelter into parts of these parks, and you inform the people that this shelter is temporary. You inform the entire population that this shelter is temporary. You even put security guards in place so that the neighborhood feels okay that there is this, maybe a population that is a little bit more mentally stressed living now in the park. But you also tell them, but don't worry, we have already taken care of this because we have a building being built and it's going to be finished in a year, and all of these people know. Now, the people who don't want to be moved out of their temporary shelter a year from now, I'm sorry, that is going to be an issue, and you're going to run into that. So it's best to communicate these things well in advance for people. You know, Jim, this is a bit about the NIMBYism, not in my backyard. The division that is caused in our society over this discussion, because politicians have refused to act. If you go into a neighborhood, okay? A neighborhood, not a city, a neighborhood. And you tell everybody in that neighborhood, 40 years from now, the zoning in this neighborhood is going to change, and what we're going to do is double the density in this neighborhood. This neighborhood currently has 4,000 backyards. 40 years, after 40 years is up, we are going to densify this to 8,000 backyards. There are subdivisions right now, Jim, in Canada, entire subdivisions, where the government could give 10 years notice of a doubling density, a 10 years advance notice that that's going to happen. And the people who originally purchased those homes on the existing zoning rules will have all been ready to have moved on by then. What you don't want to do is have 20% of those people move on, and 20% of the new families move in, who've been counting on that zoning to support their dream of a life for the next 40 years. If you tell those people, hey, wait a sec, there's only 30 years left on the zoning in this neighborhood, and after the 30 years, it automatically reverts to double density. This is how you resolve these problems. You talk openly with people, you use a data-driven approach to rectifying the situation, and you deal with it. You don't wait till someone takes the knife, that you hand someone the knife, that you didn't put a shield on it, they cut their hand, and then you have to spend time and money taking it to the hospital, getting it stitched up, and maybe a long period of remediation because you could have severed a nerve or something. Every single solution in housing is available, and it's there today. It's the ignorance and the arrogance of those involved in the housing solutions that is leaving this situation where it is. You have police forces moving on a bunch of homeless people living in tents in a park because the government has forced them into that lifestyle by making house prices astronomically out of range, requiring a house price correction that will set off a recession, which sets off massive unemployment, which then I don't know what's going to happen this time around. as a result to our society. But when I see, Jim, a homeless encampment, a camp of homeless people living in tents in a park in a major Canadian city being forced out by the police, I look at the politicians and I shake my head, and I don't know how ethically they can live with themselves, because those people are living there today because decision those politicians themselves made.
Ross Bob in Toronto asks, now that laneway homes in Toronto outnumber the ones in Vancouver, will Toronto see lower house prices and the benefit of improved affordability promised with that solution?
First of all housing markets in Canada simply have to wait for their housing bubble to pop for the correction to take place. So that's going to improve the affordability issue and return it to its natural level. Okay? That's what's going to happen. Okay? We've told listeners on the show for over a year. This is a singular opportunity to see how the MLS house price pyramid works. It was going to be way more easily seen this time around because of the lockdown. And if you look at any house price chart across Canada, you're going to see that upward swing of prices take place at the exact same time in every single municipality across Toronto or across Canada. If the municipality had previously been negative house price growth, boom, it shoots up. So what you need to do is you need to look at the percentage change that you were at the beginning of April, and then the percentage change that you were at the end of this April. Okay? So in other words, if you're minus 3% and now you're plus 12%, that is a 15% change. Okay? Look at that across all housing markets. You're going to see, generally speaking, it's going to be somewhere between 15 and 23%, which is within statistical error when you are looking at such housing markets, local housing markets of such big difference in terms of the number of houses that exist in those markets. In other words, a small housing market, you're not going to be able to see as much lift as you are going to be in a bigger housing market. Laneway homes on their own densify communities. Density makes housing less affordable. Let me say this again. All of these falsehoods, the missing middle myth. Okay, let's have put a nozzle on the end of the hose. Let's turn the tap on full, and let the water trickle out of the end. Well, we know there's pressure inside that hose. Now what we want to do is this. We want to take a T, put it in the middle of the hose, and open another tap and start filling the hose up now, even more. Well, what everybody knows is, or what basic physics says, is the end of the hose with the nozzle will begin to have a bubble. A bubble will intensify and become bigger because you started adding more water in the middle of the hose. That's what a laneway house is. A laneway house is a minor form of the missing middle myth. Look, you have planners across this city, this country, who have clearly never studied housing markets. Look, when I first started taking urban geography back in the late 70s, early 80s at university, my professor was called Stetler, and he was one of the pioneers of urban geography. You have to understand, folks, the planning profession as we know it today really only has started to exist since the 80s forward. That first 10-year period in the 70s was like new. I mean, my professor, we used a book that my professor himself wrote. That's how I was my first introduction into housing markets. His specialty was radial cities. We have radial cities here in Ontario. Guelph and Goderich are two radial cities, where you have a city center, and then the streets radiate out from that city center. So wasn't necessarily in a grid pattern like all major cities are today. It was in a radial pattern, out in concentric circles. Okay, so for me, that was my life experience when I looked at housing markets, and the radial city perspective, which is why when I look at a city, I look in circumference or rings spreading out from the city center. These laneway homes are only adding to your density, and any density increase worsens affordability. What it does do is it may cause short-term 3 to 7 year windows of lower rental prices or new segments of the rental market opening up. Okay? That will get these politicians and these planners reelected or rehired. What you never are going to see is the reality that happens between 5 and 7 years out, when affordability starts to decrease at a quicker rate than what it was before these laneway houses go in. There is no city in North America where densifying the city improved affordability. You would have to find a city that is crumbling and falling apart where densification could be shown to improve affordability. Anytime you start pumping families into the middle or the end or the entry of the property ladder, you're going to make affordability worse. You need to open the valve in the hose and let all the water flow out. Because if enough water's flowing out, you can add as much water from the tap without the hose bulging at all. We don't hear that conversation going on anywhere in this country. So, Bob, that's the answer to this laneway home missing middle myth. If you tap the middle of a hose and you constrict the nozzle and you start pouring in more water, now from two ends from the start of the hose at the tap, and you put a T in, you start putting more water in the tap, all you're going to do is make that hose start to expand, and we all know what happens. Sooner or later, you blow it up too big, and we know what's got to happen. It's got to pop.
Ross, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thanks for having me on, Jim.
My guest has been home ownership consultant Ross Kay from thewealthyhomeowner.ca. If you have any questions for Ross, you can send them to info@housestreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter @HouseStreet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HouseStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HouseStreet.com radio is a production of House Street Media Incorporated.